The 7th century dawned upon the Arabian Peninsula not merely as an era of tribal skirmishes and desert caravans, but as a period of profound cosmic tension. In the stillness of the Hijaz, where the desert winds carry the echoes of ancient secrets, a monumental shift in the spiritual landscape was beginning to stir, poised on the precipice of a revelation that would challenge the very foundations of the known world. The incoming truth collided with a landscape saturated by ancestral worship. A peculiar linguistic friction surfaced within the verses, suggesting a momentary, unexpected alignment with the desert's established pantheon. The disputed passages seemed to embed the local spirits within the very essence of the divine word. This unexpected synthesis would have signaled that the new message was merely an evolution of the ancestral ways rather than a radical rupture. This apparent harmony masked a growing fragility within the burgeoning doctrine. As the boundaries between ancient rites and the emerging creed blurred, a structural instability began to threaten the perceived permanence of the sacred transition. The desert night held its breath, a silent witness to the rhythmic, melodic flow of words that seemed to emerge from the very fabric of the cosmos. Within the flickering warmth of the hearths, the weight of each syllable carried a heavy, almost physical presence, an auditory tapestry woven into the stillness of the Arabian sands. Yet, a subtle dissonance began to hum beneath the melody, a microscopic fracture in the perceived harmony of the night's sacred cadence. Within the recited verses, the names of the three great goddesses, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, appeared with a startling, seamless grace. They sat alongside the praises of the One, creating a linguistic ambiguity that challenged the very essence of monotheistic clarity. For a fleeting moment, the distinction between the singular truth and the ancient pantheon became perilously thin. Such overlapping names threatened to erode the integrity of their ancestral worship. The assembly stood paralyzed by a creeping doubt, wondering if the emerging creed intended to supersede their traditions or simply absorb them. A jarring dissonance disrupted the rhythmic flow of the recitation, shattering the congregation's sense of absolute certainty. This auditory tremor left the gathered listeners grasping for the familiar as the sacred cadence fractured beneath the pressure of unexpected phrasing. The sudden appearance of Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat within the chant felt like a regression. This linguistic overlap suggested that the new revelation was still draped in the Such overlapping echoes cast a shroud of doubt over the emerging truth. Each recitation became a moment of existential peril as the new message threatened to be swallowed by the very traditions it sought to transcend. Within the sun-drenched, dusty streets of 7th century Mecca, the air hung heavy with the scent of burning resins and the clamor of a polytheistic society at its peak. Amidst the towering, silent idols of the Kaaba, a profound spiritual friction simmered. It was an era of intense transition, where the burgeoning monotheistic core collided head-on with the established rhythms of ancestral worship, creating a landscape where even a single misplaced syllable could alter the course of history. A celestial radiance flooded the stone, splintering the cavern's heavy silence. Within the shadows, this unfolding revelation surged with a terrifying cosmic energy, signaling a fundamental shift in the fabric of reality. The sacred monologue was punctured by the unexpected mention of the ancient Meccan deities. This sudden intrusion of local tradition into the divine decree threatened to anchor the celestial message to the very idols it intended to transcend. Such a collision of the divine and the mundane created a jarring dissonance. The absolute clarity of the revelation was compromised by these lingering echoes of antiquity. Such ambiguity placed the nascent fellowship in a state of profound spiritual peril. This instability threatened to halt their spiritual momentum. The friction arose from certain lines that seemed to acknowledge ancient tribal deities. This textual uncertainty threatened to merge the new doctrine with long-standing Meccan rituals, compromising the purity of the message. The subtle irregularities in the script suggested that even the most hallowed decrees were vulnerable to the frailty of the pen. This burgeoning instability began to leak from cloistered studies into the city's bustling thoroughfares. The crowded marketplaces became a crucible for doubt, where the divide between celestial truth and poetic artifice was increasingly questioned. This creeping uncertainty seeped through the trading routes, casting a shadow over the sacredness of local rituals. Such widespread skepticism threatened to destabilize the spiritual certainties of the entire community. The heavy presence of the ancestral shrines jeopardized the established social order of the clans. This collision between emerging monotheism and long-held customs created a friction point that challenged the fundamental stability of the local way of life. This growing doubt weighed heavily upon the hearts of the converts, transforming their devotion into a grueling test of conviction. An intense struggle for distinction now threatened the integrity of their emerging faith. The threat of spiritual contamination loomed large as the new verses echoed the rhythms of ancient worship. This perceived blending of old traditions with the new message made the purity of the monotheistic creed feel increasingly fragile. The melodic chanting of the new recitations now carried an unsettling weight. Listeners searched each syllable for traces of the old gods, fearing that these recent revelations had been poisoned by the very idols they intended to displace. Within the elite assemblies, the focus shifted from theological questioning to the preservation of social order. Leaders feared that abandoning established rites would destabilize the shared customs that maintained peace among the desert tribes. The political friction within the clans seeped into the city's crowded markets, spreading a palpable sense of spiritual unrest. This growing instability suggested that the line separating the emerging creed from ancestral worship was becoming dangerously porous. Whispers of the Garanik, birds believed to sing in divine unison, began to drift through the city's shadows. This pervasive folklore introduced a dangerous ambiguity, threatening to fuse the new message with the ancient gods. This theological tension jeopardized the sanctity of the new revelation. As the distinction between the Creator and the old pantheon eroded, the entire mission faced unprecedented scrutiny. These three goddesses, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza and Manat, stood as formidable obstacles to total devotion. Attempting to acknowledge their power would have stripped the nascent creed of its essential singular truth. The resulting discord rippled through the Meccan marketplaces, sparking a widespread crisis of communal identity. Such social unrest posed a risk to the ancestral hierarchies that this emerging movement had already begun to destabilize. The city's elite perceived these new doctrines as a direct assault on their established authority. As friction mounted among the powerful clans, the very stability of Meccan life began to fracture, leaving the community suspended between ancient tradition and an era of unforeseen transformation. The growing unrest within the merchant guilds cast a shadow over the desert caravans. This climate of suspicion prepared the way for a much more intense scrutiny of the message's divine essence. The presence of pagan imagery within the sacred text threatened the absolute purity of the incoming revelation. Such a perceived error forced many to question whether the message was truly celestial or merely a reflection of local customs. This burgeoning skepticism permeated the very fabric of the growing congregation, testing the conviction of even the most devoted followers. The sanctity of the spoken word now hung in the balance, caught between ancestral customs and the emergence of the new decree. Such mounting doubt made the integrity of the entire movement feel increasingly fragile. The growing instability rippled through the desert settlements, fracturing the unity of the nascent movement. This pervasive unease transformed every communal gathering into a space of profound hesitation, signaling a crisis that necessitated a rigorous audit of the newly shared truths. The disturbance stemmed from the unexpected inclusion of Al-Lat, Al-Uzza and Manat within the oral chants. This sudden presence of old deities unsettled the faithful, as if the new creed was being eroded by ancient traditions. Such linguistic contamination threatened the perceived singularity of the divine decree. This discrepancy triggered an urgent, systematic review of every spoken verse to safeguard the integrity of the revelation. The burden of this duty fell upon the keepers of the recitation. They navigated a landscape of shifting dialects, fearing that any lingering uncertainty might corrupt the sacred essence. These linguistic inconsistencies threatened to anchor the burgeoning faith to the ancient idols it sought to transcend. Such ambiguity introduced a jarring friction, pitting the clarity of the singular creator against the heavy weight of ancestral traditions. Every recited word now faced piercing scrutiny, transforming communal gatherings into arenas of deep suspicion. This instability within the oral record threatened the very foundation of their shared history. The once unbreakable bond of the believers began to fray under the pressure of this burgeoning uncertainty. As contradictory accounts of the verses emerged, the integrity of the spoken word began to fracture. The resulting discord left the community grasping for a single, reliable truth amidst a sea of competing voices. An unsettling dissonance permeated the desert air, as if the new verses carried the ghostly echoes of the old pantheon. Listeners strained to detect any trace of ancestral spirits within the rhythmic cadence. This creeping ambiguity signaled an impending clash between the new revelation and the ancient ways. A sudden, jarring resonance emerged when the names Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat surfaced within the sacred chant. This unexpected intrusion of ancestral nomenclature into the verses sparked an immediate, unsettling tension among those gathered. The sudden vocalization of these ancient names triggered a visceral reaction, stirring the deep-seated memories of the desert clans. This linguistic overlap created a profound ambiguity, prompting questions about whether the new revelation was a complete departure or a sophisticated refinement of their heritage. Melodic patterns within these new verses seemed to mirror ancestral chants. This unsettling resonance suggested that the new message might be an evolution of the past, rather than a total break from it. This ambiguity posed a profound challenge to the concept of infallible inspiration, inviting a rigorous scrutiny of the prophet's very connection to the heavens. It was a moment where the absolute certainty of faith met the unsettling possibility of earthly interference, forcing a confrontation between the perceived purity of the message and the tangible weight of the Meccan environment. The possibility that the text had been shaped by Meccan social pressures cast a shadow over its divine origin. Such human-driven modification threatened to compromise the absolute singularity of the new faith. This period of doubt catalyzed a profound transformation in the investigative process. Scholars shifted their attention from the content of the message to the reliability of the messengers themselves. The challenge lay not merely in the words themselves, but in the unbroken chains of transmission that connected the spoken word to the ink on the parchment. Scholars of Hadith meticulously scrutinized every link in the Isnad, searching for any fracture in the lineage of narrators. It was a rigorous, almost forensic attempt to verify the integrity of a legacy that had once lived solely in the breath of desert travelers. The disputed verses whispered to have praised the three goddesses of Mecca centered on the Quranic, the high-flying cranes that supposedly held sway over the hearts of the faithful. This brief controversial addition threatened to bridge the gap between monotheism and the old polytheistic ways, casting a shadow of ambiguity over the burgeoning message. It was a moment where the boundaries of the divine seemed to blur, momentarily blending the singular truth with the familiar idols of the Kaaba. Such profound ambiguity threatens to destabilize the very foundation of the early Meccan narrative. This dispute leaves behind a fragmented landscape where history and legend become indistinguishable. Resolving this tension requires us to look past the physical debris and probe the very architecture of the language. Instead of searching for clarity in the archives, we must examine the linguistic nuances found within the evolving recitations. This reveals a text acting not as a static monolith, but as a vessel for the cultural landscape of the era. The rhythmic flow of the verses seemed to echo local devotional patterns, even weaving the names of Al-Lat and Al-Uzza into the new recitation. This integration of ancestral deities made the line between the old and the new appear increasingly blurred. This erosion of distinction destabilized the city's social order, placing immense pressure on the ruling clans. As these overlapping rituals took hold, the very essence of Meccan life faced an unprecedented transformation. The once stable foundations of their culture were now trembling under the weight of a shifting reality.